wider confidence level in Donald Trump than African Americans, and why it's almost 50% have confidence in Donald Trump. Welcome, everyone. Gabriel Buelna, BuelnaNews. We have a great guest tonight. Not that all of our guests haven't been great, but we have a special guest. Today's guest is a national treasure, recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, founder of the United Farm Workers and the Dolores Huerta Foundation, Dolores Huerta. Good evening, Dolores. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you doing?
You know what? It's hot here in Los Angeles. Where, so viewers know, where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from Bakersfield, California.
Okay. Are you baking in Bakersfield?
Yeah, I'm staying at home here in Bakersfield, California, and trying to do the right thing. Not going out if I don't have to, and making sure when we go out that we have a mask on our face and that we do social distancing. So,
how is your health?
Oh, my health is good, thank you. I just celebrated my 90th birthday.
Oh, my goodness.
On April 10th, and we're going to be having an online birthday party on May the 30th, and we're going to invite you and all your listeners to come and join us, okay? That's May
excellent.
30th at 6 o'clock in the evening.
And we're going to do something at the end where we're going to allow viewers to raise money for the Dolores Huerta Foundation.
Oh, thank you. That would be great.
Oh, absolutely. So I want to get started. And first, I want to go over, at 90 years old, you're obviously a woman and you've gone through, you're a great leader. But how were you treated as a woman during the early days of the movement compared to today? What has changed as a 90-year-old woman? We want you here for another 30 years. What has changed?
Well, I think that everybody is now trying, they're actually realizing that women are leaders. We have seen that all over the country. We have many women that are now elected as governors. I think the state of Nevada now has women they have a majority of women in the state legislature. They have a male governor right now, but in the state legislature now, the majority of women. And all over the country, we see that we have many women governors now. In the Congress, that number has increased, and also in the California state legislature. So I think that finally, people are realizing that, hey, we as women, that we can take leadership roles, and people can respect us and use women as guide leaders also and coaches.
So Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador said in a press briefing earlier this week that women are more honorable and are the only ones allowed to handle local construction funds for schools in Mexico right now. And you've seen a lot of the leaders dealing with the coronavirus have been women across the world. So have attitude towards women throughout Latin America and U.S. Latinos shifted in your lifetime?
Oh, yes, we have seen that. In fact, they had a woman president of Chile. They had a woman president of Argentina also. They had a woman governor of the state of Chihuahua in Mexico. And so I think one thing about the new governor, López Obrador, that he has really, from the very beginning, always seen that women can be leaders, and also not only that, but encourage women to be leaders.
So what about among Mexican-American Chicanos, Latinos here in the United States?
Well, I think we're making some advances there also. We have some great women leaders. We know we have people like Maria Hinojosa, who, has these great media. Not only does she have the Latino voices that she has, her program that she has on National Public Radio, but we'll have Maria Elena Durazo from Los Angeles. My God, she is such a great leader.
My senator.
When she was the head of the Central Labor Council, but now is our senator. And, just recently, I'm sure you saw when Governor Gavin Newsom made the announcement that they were actually going to provide some stipends for undocumented workers. Well, Maria Elena Durazo is one of the people that was fighting for that, and people need to know that. And of course, a lot of us also helped by supporting Maria Elena and sending letters to the governor. to tell them not to forget the undocumented workers. As you know, many of the farm workers, hospitality workers, people that are out there doing the heavy work, like in construction, etc. These are all undocumented workers, and they were going to be left out of all of the relief packages. But myself and a lot of our sister organization, we did a big mail campaign to the governor, and it worked. And again, with Marilena Durazo's leadership, now many of our undocumented workers, including not only here in the Valley, where we have a lot of undocumented farm workers, but people in Los Angeles that are undocumented are going to get at least a little bit of relief from this pandemic that we're in right now.
So in 2012, thank you. In 2000, moving on to going over to young people and community service. In 2012, I interviewed you regarding Arizona House Bill HB 2281, which banned books by many Mexican-American authors. In that interview, you mentioned that you needed to organize, and you told youth that you needed to organize and figure out, and they needed to figure out their path. What would you say to youth who are quarantined, social distancing, but want to organize? So you told me during that time period, hey, you have to find your path. So, youth are going through a difficult time period. So how would you mentor them right now?
Well, I hope that we can have another conversation a month from now or a month and a half from now, because that is exactly what we are doing right now. We're having to organize virtually. And last week, we had many of our leaders, because we have 19 chapters of the Dolores Huerta Foundation right now in the Central Valley of California, everywhere from Kern, Tulare County, Fresno County, and we're also organizing up there in the Antelope Valley in the high desert. So we had, of our 19 chapters, we had leaders from all those chapters get on a Zoom call, and it was fabulous. And so this next couple of weeks, we're actually going to be doing virtual organizing. And one of the reasons that we're really being forced to do this is because so many of the folks that we know, although they're talking about all of these services that are available to people during the pandemic, guess what? A lot of them are not being able to access those services. So we are going into, you might say, full gear right now in all of our offices to make sure that the people that are deserving of these benefits that the state and the federal government are making available, so that we can make sure that the people that deserve these services, that they actually have access to them. So we're going into a full delivery mode, and this is all going to be done virtually. So I think a month from now, I can say to you, you know what, Gabriel, we were able to organize through Zooms and Facebook and through the internet, and we can give you some numbers about how well that worked.
Well, we're going to need them. So help us understand how young people, specifically our young Latino voters who really went off on their own and didn't follow a lot of their leaders, were energized to vote in the primary. Bernie Sanders seemed to tap into that group. Did he?
Well, one of the things, and, I have been in conversations with some of the folks that are supporting Joe Biden. And as we now know, Bernie dropped out. Okay. And so, in the conversations, I said, well, I want to see how many of the policies that Bernie was actually advocating are going to be adopted by Joe Biden, because we want to make sure that the young people continue to be engaged. And most of all, we want to make sure that they vote. And so I'm happy to report that the presidential candidate, Joe Biden, is actually going to, make this part of his campaign and part of his platform when he becomes the president, especially those things that have to do with student loans, improving our healthcare system. And God knows, with all this pandemic now, we do know that everybody has to have a healthcare, that it just can't be reserved for people that can afford it. And I know that here in California, we're very lucky because we do have a much better healthcare system than other parts of the country. But we know that also has to be expanded. And one of the ways that it has to be expanded is, of course, to include all of our undocumented residents here in the state of California. We know that the money for that is tight right now, but people do need to know that if anybody, whether they are citizen or undocumented, if they were affected by the COVID-19 virus, that they are going to have their health care covered.
So one thing near and dear to you and Cesar Chavez, God rest his soul, was community service. So what lessons do you have to share with young people, especially Chicanos, Latinos, who are aspiring to enter young life with the primary goal of pursuing the common good? What would you share to them, since you've seen a lot in your life?
Well, I think it's a combination. It's a combination of civic action, and again, we're going to be going into the election mode before November the 7th, and we don't know how long the pandemic's going to last. But I just want to say to all of the young people, one of the best ways to get involved in civic action is to volunteer for a campaign, whether it's to register voters, to educate them on why it's important for them to vote. And yes, before election, go out there and knock on doors. Go out there and knock on doors and tell folks, really, really, it's important that you register to vote, and it's important that you vote, because we know this coming election is going to have a lot of repercussions for all of us. One other way, and I want to make a special appeal, if you don't mind, on your program.
No, not at all.
Just say to everybody, please, please get involved in the census. Right now, unfortunately, in our Latino community, we are not responding. Latinos are not responding to the census. And this is going to cost us billions of dollars in California if we do not respond. Because the federal government gives out $1 trillion a year. $1 trillion a year. And how do they decide where that money is going to go? Depends on how many people are in that community or in that neighborhood or in that city. So if we don't get counted, that money's not going to come to our community. And that money goes for schools, it goes for clinics, for hospitals, for healthcare, goes for infrastructure, for street lights and roads, and the things that we need in our community. And people don't realize how much that they are worth. Each one of us in California, we're worth almost $2,000. And if you have a family of four, that's $8,000. And so when we don't get counted, that money's not going to come to our community. The other thing is that people should not be afraid, because the information does not have to be shared with anybody. And people are getting census flyers at their home. They just have to fill them out. It takes about 9 or 10 minutes to fill it out. And all it asks is for your name and how many people are in your household, their birth dates. This is basically the information that they need. And the other thing is, so it's confidential. The information cannot be shared with anybody. If anybody shares information on the census, they can go to prison for 5 years and pay a $250,000 fine. And there is no citizenship question on the census. We actually joined with other groups, the Mexican-American Legal Defense Fund. We sued President Trump to take off so that there would be no question of citizenship on that census. So all of the undocumented people, all of our legal immigrants out there do not have to be afraid. In fact, I have a saying in Spanish, Gabriel, that I'd like to share with you.
Okay.
Si no nos contamos, nos fregamos, okay?
Okay.
Si no nos contamos, nos fregamos.
Si no nos contamos, nos fregamos. We'll say that together.
Yeah, because of that money.
No nos contamos, nos fregamos.
Nos fregamos, porque that money that we need for our schools is not going to come. Not only that, but we can lose a congressional seat. And that many of us have been fighting for immigration reform for the last decade, for the last 10, 12 years. And if we lose Congress people that are going to fight for us, like you have over there in LA, you have Jimmy Gomez over there, who's a congressman, you have Lucille Roybal. And if we lose one of those champions, because if we didn't get counted, then we're really going to have a big setback when it comes to immigration reform.
No, absolutely. And we're going to move on to the politics. So we're going to make sure and tell people to just do the census.
And the young people, they can really help us. All of those young people that are out there listening, please, if you're the people that they haven't filled out the census, they can call in, or they can do it on their computer, or on their cell phone. It's so important that they call in. A lot of times, like people like myself, us older people, we're literally kind of handicapped when it comes to computers. So, reach out to your family there, your tios, your abuelos, people that and ask them, do you need help to fill out the census? I can help you. And you can do it again on your computer, on your cell phone.
Perfect. So moving on to politics here. In 2016, the census does affect politics because you won't have equal representation. So thank you for bringing that up right before we discuss it. So in 2016, only 47.6% of eligible Latinos voted, compared to 65.3% for whites, 59.6% for African Americans, and 49% for Asians. So the next few questions are going to be, how do we increase the number of Latinos voting from 47% to 58 to 60%? So going back to Mr. Obrador, he said something interesting the other day, right? He said, President Obrador, in the same press conference, stated, By helping the poor, you are maintaining social peace and preventing injustice. By helping the poor, you help the entire society. Does that have an equivalent in the U.S. society and for Mexican Americans and other Latinos with regard to what's happening with coronavirus and getting that help that we need?
Oh, absolutely. And the one thing that we have to remember is when the working people and the poor people, they often don't realize how valuable they are. They think that they don't count, like they don't count in the census. They think that they don't matter when it comes to voting. And they don't realize that they are actually the ones that can make all of the decisions. Our Latino population is so big that we can decide the elections. We can decide who's going to be our congressperson, our senator, our president. But if we don't engage, if we don't involve ourselves and vote, then actually the people that are working against us are the ones that are going to be the decision makers. So that's one thing we do with our foundation. Our whole work that we do is to empower people, to make them understand how important they are and that they are part of the society, but they have to get engaged. And a lot of our immigrants, they come here to the United States because they want to live a better life. But you know what? That better life isn't going to happen unless we elect people that are going to stand up for us. And the only way that that can happen is if we vote. So we just have to, they call us the sleeping giant, and because we don't vote. The other thing is they want to make us invisible. They want to make us invisible. Well, we can't afford to be invisible anymore because it's our children that are suffering when we don't engage. And so, we have an obligation and a responsibility. I always like to quote Senator Robert Kennedy, just before he was killed, Gabriel. One of his last words that he said before he was assassinated, he said, "We have obligations and responsibilities to our fellow citizens." And I think that's what we have to remember. If you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for your children or do it for all of the youth that so we don't want to deprive them of their future. And that's what we do. When we don't vote, when we don't get counted on the census, they are the ones that are going to suffer.
So in Political reported, an internal Biden rift opened up with regard to really not coming to grips to what the strategy online is for the Biden campaign. What must Biden do to successfully reach and gain the support of Latino electorate, knowing that a lot of Latinos voted for Sanders? What should Biden do, and is he doing it?
Well, he's got to reach out to our community, and he's got to really paint a picture of what it's going to look like when he becomes a good president. He's got to commit for immigration reform. He's got to commit to have a better educational system for our Latino students. Part of the work that we do in the Dolores Huerta Foundation is stopping the school-to-prison pipeline. We have sued our high school district because of the large expulsion of African-American and Latino students, and we won our lawsuit. And that doesn't mean that everything is okay right now because they try to do things to get around that. But we're still on top of them to make sure that we end. And that discrimination is happening all around the country. It's not just here in Bakersfield and Kern County. It's happening everywhere in Chicago, in Texas, and New York State, where you have numbers of Chicanos and African Americans, our kids of color, are not getting educated. And that's one thing that Biden can do to make sure that we have a good person in charge of the education of our country and give us the resources that we need and make it easier, make it possible so that our kids can have access to colleges and have the kind of equitable education that they need to be able to get into college in the first place. And Bernie's whole thing that he was saying about, we should have pre-college education. Now, I know after this pandemic, it's going to be maybe a little bit harder, but it's really interesting because before they said, well, there's not enough money for that. Hey, all of a sudden they found all this money, to help people during this pandemic. So when they said that there wasn't enough money for universal health care, or there wasn't enough money for kids to go to college without a college tuition, well, if they could spend a few $1 trillion like they're doing now, I think they can spend a few $1 trillion to make sure that we have universal health care and universal college education free.
So Latinos gave Bernie unprecedented support. Latinos saved his campaign. So his ground game in states like California, Arizona, and Texas relied heavily on intensive person-to-person contacts. And that's a kind of recognition of the nuanced concerns of folks. So in order for Biden to win, he needs Arizona, he needs North Carolina, he needs Florida, he needs Colorado, he needs Nevada. Heavy. That's where Latinos, especially Latinos, vote increase from 47 to 58%. Do you see the Biden campaign spending the energy and believing like the Sanders campaign?
Well, I think he can do it, but he's going to need the help, all of us. He's going to need all of our help to be able to get him elected. And I do believe that, he's a decent human being. He's a decent person. And I think he always will try to do the right thing. But in order for him to be able to get the presidency, it's going to take every single one of us, Latinos out there, to help him get there. And I say for the young people, don't get discouraged, because we have to keep our eye on the prize. And if you didn't get the candidate that you wanted. I mean, I supported Kamala Harris. And of course, she dropped out early on. I would have loved to see a woman, Elizabeth Warren, become the candidate. But because they didn't make it, that doesn't mean that I'm going to drop out and say I'm not going to help. Everything is so important right now. The stakes are so high, especially for our young people, because we're also talking about issues like climate change, global warming. So we have so many big issues on the table right now that none of us can afford to sit up. And not only because it's going to take more than just voting. It's going to take a lot of our young people and older people like myself to get out there and actually do the work, do the phone banking, do the door knocking, talk to our neighbors, to our friends, to our relatives, and encourage them all to vote. This election is probably, and I know they say this every year during the election year, but when we think of the stage that we're in right now, when we think of what happened, when this pandemic happened, how many people, thousands of people that have died in the United States of America. I'm sure in Los Angeles, even here in our area here, that people have died from this from this virus, and it could have been stopped if we would have had the people in charge of our country that knew what was going to happen, that were prepared for it, and they weren't. And this could happen again. So we can't take any chances. We've got to make sure we elect somebody who is competent, somebody who is intelligent, somebody who cares about people. That's the kind of a president that we need. And I think Joe Biden is going to be that president.
So I interviewed Father Boyle. You obviously know Father Boyle a few weeks back for the show. And he mentioned that consultants always have a message for youth. Then he said that when he hears that he tunes them out when he says that. However, he recommended folks listen to youth. So does the Democratic National Party need to stop preaching to Latinos and listen to our issues in order to get us out to vote?
Yes, unfortunately, what you just said is so true, that the Democratic Party, hasta la fecha, until right now, they really, really haven't known how to reach out to Latinos. I'm actually a board member of People for the American Way. This is Norma Lear's organization, whom I know you know. And we have done a lot of work all over the country with the People for the American Way, addressing Latinos specifically. And we have had great, great success in so many areas. And because they tailored their message to Latinos. We were successful in getting Latinos to vote for Terry McCullough in Virginia, for instance, when the guy that he was running against, was saying that immigrants are like rats and they should use pesticides to get rid of them. And that guy, unfortunately, is now the head of the Immigration Service. That Trump appointed him to be the head of Immigration Service. But we were able to deprive him from being the governor of Virginia. And as we go around the country, we have been able to be influential in getting Latinos elected. But the DNC and the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, they have to know how to message Latinos. And as you said, they have to listen to us, right, and not just talk to us.
Thank you very much. So in interviewing you a few years back, going on to voter suppression, you mentioned that Republicans in Arizona, where they were very angry with you, I think you remember that, at you, because supposedly in 2006, you said Republicans hate Latinos at Tucson High School, and that caused a lot of ruckus. Does the statement still make sense today, especially in the era of Trump? Do Republicans hate Latinos?
Well, I like to say that was a prophecy, because I made that statement, before Trump ran for the presidency, and we have seen how they have made their continual attacks on the Latino community, and that's why we're having trouble with the census, Gabriel, because they have terrified our community, especially our undocumented community and our mixed families, so that they're afraid to commit to sign up for the census. And I believe that they did it with this intention. They did it exactly for that reason. The deportations, everything that happened, because they want to terrify our community so that we will not participate. So we have to, we kind of have to fight back. We can't just take all of that sitting down. And the way that we fight back is by getting engaged, by participating in the census, by participating in the election. And because we know that we have a valiant community. We have people that have so much courage. When you think of the history, the past history, the current history of our forefathers who, traveled and went through so many dangers just to get to the United States, or the ones that were already here, as we know that we were already here. But everything that we went through, and we're still here, like they say, aquí estamos y no nos vamos, we're here, we're not going
no fuimos. We never left.
Yeah, that's right. Okay,
your family has generations, and your uncle, I believe, was an assemblyman in New Mexico, correct?
Yeah, my father.
Oh, your father. Okay.
Yeah, and my grandparents were born in the state of New Mexico. But but the thing is that we cannot let them terrify us the way that they're doing right now, and make us, trying to keep our voices silent. So we've got to make our voices heard, and we've got to make them heard loud. And the best way we can do that is, again, by being counted in the census and by putting that ballot in the ballot box. And you asked me earlier, what's the best way to get Latinos to vote? I have a theory, and this is in all of the work I've done for the last 60 years, that we have to teach our people how to vote. Now, that sounds kind of inane when I say that, but a lot of families, they get that ballot, it's got all of these names on it, it's got all of these propositions, quieren quedar mal, they think they have to fill out every little single thing on the ballot. And what we have to say to them is, get informed so you'll know how to vote for. But don't think that you have to fill out the entire ballot. Vote, fill out what you know, but make sure that your name and your ballot goes in there so they'll know that you voted.
So the bottom line with vote by mail, are Republicans trying to suppress Latino vote by not supporting mail by vote?
Well, yeah, that's part of their voter suppression. That's part of their voter suppression. And we have to be very careful because I hate to say this, but many of those people are really, they're not honest. And like myself, I've been voting by mail for the last maybe 15, 20 years. This year, guess what? I did not get my ballot in the mail. And many people that I know didn't get it, okay? So we have to be really smart. And so when we talk about voter registration, I don't like to say that, voter registration. I like to say voter education, because it's not just about registering somebody to vote, but it's also educating them on how to vote. And then it's mobilizing them to make sure that they vote.
Thank you. What mental political shifts must Latinos make right now in order to beat Donald Trump? Specific, with the pandemic, with the quarantine, and we have a goal of increasing the Latino turnout from 47% to 60%. So you just mentioned it, but what other political shift must we go through in order to really hit those higher numbers?
Well, we have to make a mental shift, number one, to make everybody understand how important they are, how worthy they are, and make them understand that they can make the difference. I think that's the main thing. And then, like I said, go out there and actually coach them. You go out to some of these folks that have never voted and say, look, this is the way that you do it. And maybe a lot of this is going to have to be done online through Facebook, whatever. We don't know what's going to happen between now and November. And we have to just get a lot of volunteers. If everybody that we know would volunteer to go out and knock on a door in their neighborhood, because people want to vote, but like I said, no quieren quedar mal. They don't want. They think they're going to make a mistake, and because they're very honest people, and they're afraid. Make a mistake, and I don't want to do this. What do we should tell them? No, it's really quite simple. This is how you do it. And in California, people can sign up for a vote by mail, and I think you can even do it on your cell phone. So we can get as many people to do this as possible, and if everybody takes this to heart, realizing how important this election is in November. And we all volunteer to go out there. I'm 90 years old, Gabriel, as we said before. But I was out there knocking on doors in this last election in the primaries, and I will be out there knocking on doors. And if we can get out there, in November, I will be out there knocking on doors. Even if I had to do it with a face mask and social distancing.
What's the virtual equivalent to knocking on doors and social activism from where people are sitting so that they don't feel that they can't do anything even from their office, just like we're doing?
Well, actually, like I mentioned to you earlier, we did exactly that. The other day we had many of our leadership, we had 90 people on a Zoom call, and we were talking about exactly that. And actually, during the next couple of months, this is what we're going to be working on in delivering tablets, of course, to a lot of those people that don't know how to use computers, trying to do online training for them. And we're going to try to expand our reach to as many people as we can. And now, because so many of the kids that are home right now, they have been given tablets and tried to expand this to as many people as we can. So I'll be able to tell you a month from now how many people we were able to virtually train to be able to use computers to do Zoom calls, and then also so that they can, because you can actually vote on your cell phone eventually, through absentee mail.
And we'd love to have you back in a month. Moving on, we just have a few more questions. So Mexico is currently United States' one of the largest, I believe, second largest trading partner, with 130 million people. But U.S.-Mexico policy just seems to be non-existent or very focused. What change, if any, would you make to U.S.-Mexico policy in light of coronavirus? Because we have you're starting to see a lot of deaths in Mexico, but we're not hearing our media focus on what's happening to the South. We hear about England and Europe, but we're not hearing what's happening a few hundred miles from our home. How would you change U.S.-Mexico policy and Latin American policy?
Well, I like what you said about the media. I think we as Latinos should insist that our major media channels, unless you're watching me, I like to watch PBS because you actually get better coverage on PBS than you do on your evening news on NBC or CBS or ABC. And so I think that we should start insisting that we have more coverage of Mexico and Latin America also. It's really interesting when you read the major newspapers, you always hear about Asia, Japan, China, whatever's happening there. You hear about Europe, but very little coverage about Mexico or even Africa. Very little coverage about Latin America. And I think it's very purposeful because they don't like people to focus on that, just like they haven't been recognizing farm workers as frontline workers. And so that's something that we can start insisting with our media that they do that. And if not, kind of do some more on our social media. So, for instance, I don't know how many people know this, but a friend of ours just called us from who's stuck at the border because he can't get across. He lives in Oaxaca, but they have boarded off the little towns, and he can't even get back to his farm because they have boarded off. They have checkpoints there because they don't want people to travel between the different towns and in terms of trying to stop the coronavirus. But once this pandemic is over and once we get a new administration, we should insist that the United States give more assistance to Mexico. And some of those things that we can do are just technical assistance in terms of buildings, for instance, to help them with more modern building methods that they have. Mexico should not be treated as the back porch of the United States. It should be treated as a partner of the United States, because when we think of all of the support and assistance that Mexico gives to the United States, but somehow it's como el asadón. It's just, one way, like they say the whole, just one way. So the United States needs to start giving back to Mexico, because not only the people that from Mexico that really sustain the health and the safety of the United States, the economy of the United States, but it is not recognized. Hopefully, under the new administration, we can make this happen.
Thank you. If you were advising Joe Biden, any recommendations for vice president? Well,
he said he's going to have a woman.
He's going to have a woman. Are there? But I haven't heard any Latinas on those lists. Anyone that you might want to promote?
Well, Maria Elena Durazo would be a great one to
she'd be
begin
perfect.
with. She's a great labor leader, and she's a great fights for the immigrant for rights of immigrants. But I think there's other women. I think Elizabeth Warren would be great because of just her economic ideas that she has, which of course would help all of us, whether we're Latinos or other ethnic groups. And I think Kamala Harris is also a good choice for him. They've also talked about Stacey Abrams, from Georgia. So there's a lot of great women out there. I've also heard that the governor of Michigan is also being considered. This is a woman that was being picketed by all of these crazy people that want to open up the economy, and they were yelling there and at the steps of her Capitol, walk her up. I mean, because of the insanity that is going on right now with some of the Trump supporters.
So what other, before we get into the last question, is there, so we've seen the pandemic is already revealing how it will transform the way we live, I believe, because in none of our lifetimes have we experienced this. Folks around the country are looking for transformational changes to our economy, healthcare, childcare, incarceration, voting, and universal income, to name a few. How do you see these issues transforming our lives, and what other issues do you see as important to address as we anticipate a world after coronavirus?
Well, I mentioned healthcare, and there's been a lot of discussion about healthcare being part of somebody's jobs. I know with the farm workers union, I used to negotiate contracts and made sure we had healthcare as part of the contract. But healthcare should not be attached to somebody's job. This has got to be something that the government provides, and workers shouldn't have to give up part of their wages to get healthcare. And so I think that would be one big thing that we could fight for. Healthcare has to be part of government. It shouldn't be tied to your job, for one thing. I think we all know that the virtual world, that now that it has been expanded, it's not going to shrink. If anything, it's going to grow. So I think that's going to have a very big impact. And then we have to think of the new jobs that are going to be created. And I don't know if you've heard this or not, but I heard this morning that in California, the people who have been most affected by the loss of jobs are Latinos and young adults. So we know that this is affecting our community a lot. So we have to be thinking of new training programs so that people can be trained into the new virtual world of technology. So we have to start thinking ahead beyond the pandemic and to see how it's going to affect our community. I think childcare services are going to be really more important now. And I know this is something that you have been involved in for many, many years. I think that's also going to be expanded. We know teaching is going to change to some extent. And I think this is one place that we have to fight to make sure we keep the classroom, because when young people go to school, it's not about just what they learn, but this is where they learn to be social. This is what we can teach young people. When we talk about sexism, we can teach young men why women are equal and why they need to respect women. We can teach young people about racism and making them understand that we're all one human race. And I like to say that we all come from Africa because this is where our human race began. And getting rid of some of the racism, some of the homophobia, the sexism that exists in our society. So I think we're going to have to fight really hard to make sure that we still have in-person classrooms and not just online classrooms. Because while online classrooms may be good for some people, at the end of the day, we lose the socializing, the social norms that people need to learn to be able to get along. And hopefully out of this will come out with a better world. And yes, of course, the environment. I think that one good thing that has come out of the pandemic is we see that rivers are cleaner, that the air is cleaner. I'm sure in LA, Los Angeles, like here in Kern County, we have one of the worst air qualities in the nation. And all of a sudden, guess what? You can see the sky and it's blue. So, there are some good things that, again, more respect for the environment and why we have to take care of Mother Earth. So I think some good things are going to be coming out of this.
Any thoughts on what you think your legacy will be? You're 90 years young, and I'm looking forward to celebrating your 100th birthday, your 100-year birthday. But what do you think your legacy will be as an activist, organizer, human being who cares about people?
Well, I think this is our whole message is to always remind people that they have power, but at the same time that they have responsibilities, not only to themselves and their families, but also to each other. And before we celebrate my 100th, Gabriel, let's celebrate my 90th, okay?
And how do we celebrate your 90th birthday? How can people help the Dolores Huerta Foundation?
Well, we want people to join us. We're going to have Jane Fonda, George Lopez, Gloria Steinem, Carlos Santana, and a lot of other celebrities are going to be joining us. Ozomatli and many others have already confirmed that they're going to be celebrating with us on. It's going to be May the 30th at 6 o'clock in the evening. It's going to be an online celebration, and we'll put out as much publicity as possible so that people can join us.
Is there a website?
We're also raising money to build a building. We're going to have a Peace and Justice Cultural Center right here in Bakersfield, kind of to honor all of the immigrants that have made California great. And so that'll be part of our celebration too, asking people to support us to raise money to build a campus. But we're going to have a child care center, and we're going to ask you for help on that one. A child care center, yes, a credit union, a community organizing, learning, a center there to teach people how to organize, so we can spread the lessons that we learned from Fred Ross Sr., who taught us how to organize. He organized the first chapter of CSO there in Los Angeles with Eduardo Edroy Ball, Tony Rios, and those people. This is where we got our first lessons on organizing, and then we took them not only throughout California, but throughout the country with the Great Boycott. And we continue to do that work of grassroots community organizing to empower people to take control, not only of their lives, but to take control of their communities. And so that's what we will be raising money for the Dolores Huerta Foundation to continue this great work that we need.
And where do people go and donate?
Well, we will have it online, and it's going to be, on May the 30th. And we'll be putting the word out, and we'd like to ask you to also help us share the information.
Thank you very much. So,
and we do have a website, DoloresHuerta.org, DOLORES, Huerta HUERTA.org, and information on our website.
We'll add that on. And after this, we're going to go on Facebook Live, and we're going to get 100 donors at minimum to get $100 each for your birthday, and we're going to be listing those today. Dolores Huerta, it's been an honor, a pleasure. Happy birthday, feliz cumpleaños, and keep the fight up.
And thank you very much for all the work that you're doing. Thank you so much. Si se puede.
Si se puede. All right. We have a lot of great content coming up. So if you're on Facebook, share and like us. If you're on Twitter, follow and retweet. If you're on Instagram, follow us. And if you're on YouTube, subscribe and share our content. Be good to your families in this time. Have a good rest of your day.